Hey everybody, it's Trevor here with the channel where every day is range day, and in this week's video we're going to be going through my first impressions on the Trijicon SRO. Let's check it out. Alright guys, of course in getting into this firearm is of course clear, and also we're not sponsored by Trijicon or anybody like that. Nobody sent me this optic to review. I paid for it with my own money and nobody paid me to say good things about it. And of course I'll do my best to remain impartial as I'm talking about this optic. But now getting into it, if you're not familiar with Trijicon, maybe you should be. They're a American-made manufacturer of optics. The RMR and the SRO are their notable handgun type optics. They're also known for the Trijicon ACOG. So odds are if you're into guns and gear, you've probably heard of this thing. Chandler and I each got one of these a couple weeks ago during an Easter sale, I believe, where we managed to snag them for a little under 500 bucks, which is a pretty good deal. But again, this is about a $500 optic. Definitely not cheap. But let's see what you get for that. The particular model I have on my Glock 34 here is the 2.5 MOA version. They make it in a 1 MOA and a 5 MOA option as well, but I settled on the 2.5 as a good middle ground here, and I'm happy with that particular option. I've only had it out for one range day, a good 4 or 5 hours or something like that, shooting with this particular optic right here, but I do think I have enough to have at least my first impressions on it and also give you a little bit of an idea of what you get if you were to purchase one of these in the box. Moving on to that packaging side of things, of course, for what you get if you buy one of these, it does come in Trijicon's sort of signature plastic bolt. It's a pretty nice box. Nice little snap tab here, and there's really not too much inside the box here. You'll have some foam pieces, and then the optic will just be kind of sitting in there. Of course, if you do pull the bottom piece of foam out, there is the manual, and I have my old Glock plate in there for was the MOS version, but you do get the instruction manual. They do give you an extra battery, which is kind of nice. Trijicon sticker, which everybody loves, and then just your usual documentation on, Trijicon itself, warranties, installation, things like that. The installation itself is pretty simple, and you will also get a single pair of screws with this particular optic, but as we get into it, that'll kind of be my chief complaint. You only get one set of screws. Maybe they'll fit what you're trying to put the gun on, maybe they won't, and that's usually in terms of length. And that's really all you get in terms of the box. I'm a big fan of it. It's a quality packaging for a quality product. It's 500 bucks, so you should get something pretty solid with it. But enough about the box itself, onto the optic. And like the RMR, the SRO is made out of aircraft grade aluminum, so it should be good and tough, but there are some durability, I don't know if concerns is the right word, but maybe drawbacks compared to the RMR that are sometimes reported, and I'll weigh in on that as well. The RMR is a proven track record of durability, and its sort of arch shape with the two little peaks on the edges are largely responsible for that. Of course, looking at the SRO here, it's just a circle over the end of it, and that's what gives you the large viewing window that everybody's a big fan of. But some people can say or report some durability concerns because of this shape. If you have a direct drop impact like on that, all that force is basically concentrated on the very peak of the circle here. And looking at the optic itself, there is a weld of sorts right along that crease. You can definitely see a seam there. I don't have too much to comment on terms of durability this far. I haven't been throwing this down the mountain or drop testing it at all. It does look like it could take a hit, but I have seen some concerns about it in the past. It's of course a very well made product by Trijicon. The fit and finish on it is of course top notch, which is what I would expect for $500. So that's pretty much on par with what I could expect for this product. Nothing really negative to comment on it at this point, but I do of course have to bring up that durability concern that some people have experienced or like to talk about in other reviews of this particular optic. I know there are certain shrouds that you can get that kind of clamp over this, like the SIG shroud. Jaegerworks makes one called the Bros system. It's basically just another titanium housing that sort of encapsulates this. You can see similar patterns on the Holosun optics or of course that SIG shroud. Something like that's definitely a surefire way to alleviate any durability concerns. And the last thing I'll say about durability is sort of what are you using this for? Of course, I'm just a civilian and can't comment on duty use for this, but if you're using this for a concealed carry gun or just like a match gun where you put it on the belt for shooting competitions and that type of environment, I wouldn't have any durability concerns about this whatsoever. If it's concealed carry, it's mostly on your body the whole time, and your odds are you're not going to be rolling around in the rocks and maybe dropping this off of a ledge or buildings or what have you, something that you might see in a duty environment. And you can say about the same things for the match type environment, which is usually where you find this optic sitting on the larger handguns like the Glock 34, other equivalents. and it's for speed and target acquisition in that type of match setting. Again, durability is not usually a concern in there. It could probably take a drop if you do, so I wouldn't really have any concerns about the durability. Moving on from durability, perhaps the only thing that I was just a little disappointed about is the amount of screws that Trijicon sends you with this. Again, you get one set of screws that come in here, and they're the correct diameter, and they'll fit into the optic here, and of course your slide has to be milled for that diameter of screws, but it's the length of screws that gets me. I forget the specific length that actually comes with it. I think it might be a 1/2 inch length screw, and if you have a Glock MOS system like this on the Glock 34 here with the slide and the plate on there, you need a 3/8 inch screw. Needless to say, that doesn't fit. The screw's too long and it'll bottom out before it's snug down on here on the optic and actually clamping it through the plate into the slide. Naturally, that's a problem, and I really don't think it would kill Trijicon to just throw another set of screws in there that are either the 1/2 or the 3/8 length, and that probably covers you on the majority of platforms that you would be wanting to install this optic on. I figured the Glock is probably one of the more popular ones, and just thought it was a little odd and a little annoying that this $500 optic does not come with a set of screws that would fit it right from the factory. So you either gotta cut them down, grind them down, or buy a new set of screws. Or you could buy Trijicon's kit for another 20 bucks just to get the 2 little screws that go in here. That's pretty lame if you ask me, and I was a little, I don't know, just annoyed by it when I was setting this up for the first time. You mean to spend all this money? They give you 2 screws, I mean, come on, just give me 2 more. It costs almost nothing. Definitely not $20 on the kit. You could probably buy some better screws from McMaster-Carr or somewhere else online. Just sort of a pet peeve thing for me. Come on, Trijicon, there's 2 more screws here. That's all you need to do. Of course, going on from that, the installation is super simple with the MOS at least, and other sort of milled systems. Again, it's just 2 screws for the plate and then 2 screws in here, of course Loctite and let it sit for a couple hours before you go shooting 0 for the first time, but that's really all it is. It comes with the battery already. The battery plate's in the top here, so it's easy to change without having to re-zero, and of course the battery life is something, 10-20,000 hours or whatever, that most of the LED optics come with nowadays. Of course, there's no shake awake like the Holosun, which would be an amazing feature to see on here, but Trijicon hasn't had that. I don't really know if they're planning on adding it. I would love it, but it's not a super big drawback. It would be nice, but does not have it on the SRO. Of course, it's got good windage and elevation buttons or dials on the top and the side here. The clicks are nice and affirmative, nothing bad to talk about there, works great. The buttons are nice and large on the sides, pretty easy to hit with a gloved hand or something like that. I do wish the clicks were a little more positive. I know my 508T has a really good physical click that you can feel when you punch the button. This has one too, but it's just not quite as snappy or positive like that. But the buttons are fine. They're nice and big, and you can definitely get them with a gloved hand. I just wish the click was a little more positive. And I know at this point it probably sounds like I don't really like this thing, but believe me, I do love it. The viewing window is phenomenal. It's huge. You can see so much with the dot. I'm rotating it here, and the dot is still in the window, and that's quite a bit of movement, especially compared looking at this through a 508T or the Trijicon RMR. Even this window is massive, and that's a big reason that a lot of people like it in the competitive scene. It's a lot faster. You can see the dot with a little more room for error there, and that really is a standout feature. And all the hype that you hear about the Trijicon RMR looking good and having that window and the dot's clean and the glass is good, it really does live up to the hype. And this is probably one of the few pieces of equipment that I can say actually does live up to that type of hype. It really is everything it's cracked up to be, and I'm definitely glad I purchased it. The glass clarity is also top notch. I think it's even clearer than the 508T that I have. I know the RMRs have a little bit more bluish tinge on them than I would perhaps like. This glass really is quite clear and phenomenal. You can see there's a little bit of anti-glare coating on there, so it's not perfectly clear, just the teeniest amount of blue, but it's hardly noticeable. Definitely not a big deal to me, and it's by far the clearest glass on handgun optic that I own to date. The dot itself, I have the 2.5 MOA, it is crisp and clear in there. The zeroing works out great. The brightness is very well responsive. I mean, you can get the dot actually pretty tiny if you turn it down, and maybe you want a little bigger, 2 or 3 clicks up, and you're plenty good. It's just a phenomenal piece of equipment, and it does work very, very well. I don't have too much to complain about it other than the screws is really my only thing. Of course, it is a pretty expensive optic, so all these things are kind of on par for what I would expect for it to be, but it definitely lives up to the hype. It's super cool to be shooting behind for the first time. I really enjoyed it. I believe Chandler did too. The only other thing I would point out, just to be aware of, is that the The RMR and the other ones are pretty flat or flush with this front ledge of the optic here, but the SRO does kind of stick out a little bit more towards the ejection port, and this might not be the best fit for your particular handgun platform based on the spacing of the ejection port and where this actually sits if your slide's milled or something like that. If the front ledge of the optic here does overhang the ejection port, you probably shouldn't use it on that gun because that brass will come back and be smacking into this all day long. Definitely not something you want to do, especially for something this expensive. That could potentially be alleviated if you would go for a custom mill job and take out the rear dovetail for your back sight. Could probably work if you fit like that. Something on the MOS is kind of fixed, but it works. Again, just something to be aware of there on something where a traditional mill job might put this a little too far up over the ejection port there. But overall, my first impressions on this optic are phenomenal. It's a bit expensive, but it really does live up to the hype around it, and it is basically worth every penny in my opinion. Sure, they could go with some better screws, but that's just a minor annoyance from my end, and it is an absolute joy to shoot behind. It really does make a difference, I think, in terms of ease of acquisition on the target, and you definitely feel like you're a little bit faster. Of course, you can train to be even faster than this if you don't have one. It's not something that's going to be a cure-all to make you, half a second faster on any kind of drill or course or anything like that. I don't really believe that your equipment is as big of a factor as your own practice and your training. But if you want every cutting edge and every second that you could possibly get out of something for like a competition scenario or even concealed carry, look no further than this thing right here. Definitely lives up to the hype. Perhaps it's expensive, but you definitely get what you pay for, and I would absolutely recommend it at this stage. If you like this video, feel free to leave a like down below. And if you have any questions about the Trijicon SRO or maybe how it compares to some of the other optics that you've seen on the channel, or anything else about the features of it, what we think about it, compatibility with different guns, leave them down below in the comments. We'd love to hear from you guys and answer some questions. And as always, make sure to subscribe to the channel, where every day is range day. Thanks for watching, guys.
Trevor, that was some wild accuracy. You disarmed him.
Tried to save his life. So
You
kept coming.
did what all those people on Twitter say you should do to people with knives.
Shoot him in the